All right, let's try it one more time. Good morning. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started with the Bible study hour portion of our presentation today. So just a couple of things. At some point, we'll take an offering to support the ministry. If you're writing a check, you can write it to CMI. Creation Ministries International is what that stands for, and we'll make sure that it gets to them. And so the offering in this hour, if it gets put in the plate, it's going to go to them. Okay, so just that's what we're going to do. We appreciate them coming and helping us, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But this has been a wonderful blessing. The first hour was very good. I'm looking forward to it again. Other than that, everything else will still be going on and after church and stuff, so there's no pressure on that. And there are some things to sign up for newsletters and stuff. We're going to just keep them in the back. We're not going to hand them out. With that, Dr. Carter, it's yours.
Well, look at that. I didn't chase everybody away. All right, for this hour, we're going to be talking about a very difficult subject, and it's the subject of dinosaurs. And it's difficult because the whole idea of dinosaurs was used to drive home the thought that the Earth is millions of years ago, starting in the early 1800s. Every interpretation about them has basically been old, and then in the middle of the 1800s, and evolution came on the scene, they've definitely been used for both those ideas. So we're going to see if we can fit them into the Bible, which isn't necessarily easy, but we will do it. Now, a lot of what I say has already appeared in our Creation magazine or on our website, creation.com, or in any number one of the books that are out here, or even more books that we have on our website to answer even more questions. So those are the sources to go to, because I can't tell you everything. I've got less than an hour, and I've got 3 hours of material. So I'm going to have to skip over some things here. But before we start talking about dinosaurs, we have to ask the question, what is a dinosaur? Now, I remember being a kid, you read those accounts in the Old Testament about people living a really long time. I said, well, what would happen to an iguana if it lived a really long time? Because reptiles keep growing, right? Would an iguana or something like that morph into a T-Rex? The answer is no. Because even baby T-Rexes look like big T-Rexes. In fact, dinosaurs, as a group, are a unique group of reptiles. They look different than all the other reptiles. They have different holes in their skulls, and their hips are shaped differently. So all the reptiles alive today, except for snakes, their legs stick out to the side. But dinosaurs stood up. 2 legs or 4, they bore their weight on their legs. Unlike an alligator that has to do a push-up and move, and when he's tired, he rests on his belly again. Dinosaurs would stand. Did you just learn something? Yes. Okay, we're talking about a group, an independent group of reptiles. Now, the swimming reptiles, the plesiosaurs, mosasaurs, chronosaurs, those aren't dinosaurs. The flying reptiles, Quetzalcoatlus and the pterosaurs, those aren't dinosaurs. There are other extinct group of reptiles that are out there also. There's a bunch of them, actually. But we're just going to be talking about dinosaurs. But then the instant question comes up. What happened to them? They're not walking around today. Where'd they go? What's the story we hear in the media? A big asteroid. How long ago? Anybody know? 65 million years ago is the evolutionary number. Now, I don't agree with that number, but I got to know the number, right? We got to know what the numbers are. 65 million years ago, a big asteroid supposedly hit the Earth and caused the extinction of the dinosaurs because of global cooling. You've heard that, right? Okay. How come the crocodiles survived? How come the turtles survived? How come the butterflies survived? All the major families of butterflies lived with dinosaurs. We have their fossils. In fact, one of them I was looking at yesterday, it was a fossil moth. They said, we think we know what species it is because it's still alive today. Now, they can't give it the same species name because Darwin taught us that species change very slowly over millions of years, and you can't have the same species existing for millions of years. So they have it's in the same genus, but it looks just like the modern moth. what environmental catastrophe could kill off all the dinosaurs? The meat-eating ones, the plant-eating ones, the big ones, the little ones that lived in the far north and the far south, the ones that lived in the tropics, and not kill off the butterflies? I don't know. Nobody knows. This makes no scientific sense. The asteroid impact theory is a theory. The flood theory is a theory. Now, the flood theory is a better explanation of the butterflies surviving, but still, I don't know where the dinosaurs went. If they were on the earth with Adam and Eve, they would have been on the ark, they would have been on the earth after the flood, and yet they're gone today. And yet a lot of other things have also gone extinct. But this is illustrating the limitations of science. Science can only know so much. And we're talking about historical science. There's a lot we can't know because no one was there to witness what happened. But let's talk about what a species is now before we get into any more dinosaur questions. Here I've got an example of 11 of the ceratopsids. You probably heard of Triceratops on the top left, right? Anyone ever heard of Pachyrhinosaurus or Styracosaurus? No? Well, Protoceratops is not there, Microceratops is not there. There's a lot of other ceratopsids that are not there. But if a paleontologist finds a toe bone of a ceratopsid, they say, oh, that's a ceratopsid toe bone. It's not the same as a tyrannosaur toe bone, not the same as a sauropod toe bone. It'll fit in. There's this group of species. In fact, these are all different genera even. But as a biologist, I define the word species as if two things can successfully breed together, they're the same species. These are all dead. We can't breed them. Geologists use a different definition of the word species. They say if two things look different, they're different species. Okay, Mr. Geologist. How many species are there on the grass? That's the world's largest dog standing next to the world's smallest dog. I can guarantee you that if the bones of those animals are found in the fossil record and we didn't have dogs to compare to, they would call them, they'd both be carnivores because they have carnivore teeth. But they would not assume that these things are closer related, even though those are gray wolves. They're not red wolves or coyotes or African jackals. Genetically, all dogs in the world are gray wolves. And look what happens. We can change a species very quickly. So if we know species can change, that means that God created them to change. That means everything Charles Darwin said actually fits in with the Bible, strangely. But when we take this thought that species can change, and yet in the fossil record there are different groups of species that are very similar to each other, with big gaps between other groups, we realize there's about 50 basic kinds of dinosaur. We got the ceratopsids and the duck-billed hadrosaurs, those little tanks, the ankylosaurs with the clubs on their back, on their tails. We got the stegosaurs with the plates on their back. We got the theropods, the meat eaters, and the long sauropods. So let's talk about our challenge, right? The meat-eating dinosaurs, the theropods. What's a theropod? This is a theropod. The ones with the short little legs that don't even, like T-Rex, no one can figure out what those front legs on a T-Rex are for. They can't reach their mouth, they can't reach the ground, but they're there. But those theropods, I think I skipped over something. Okay, we're going to skip because I'm on this slide now. Let me ask you a question. Is there any evidence that dinosaurs died out during a flood? Well, I wouldn't ask the question if I didn't have an answer, right? You ever remember the first Jurassic Park movie from the 1980s? Remember the opening scene? They got this machine that goes boom in the ground, and it echoes, and they run over to the computer screen, right? And the computers back then were so fast, it drew a picture of what it saw. And it was a velociraptor in that pose. We find so many dinosaurs in this pose. The evolutionary paleontologists, they just call it the dead dinosaur posture. And it's weird because when animals die today, like a cow or a jackal, they don't do that. Right? When a cat dies, it just goes, bleh. It doesn't go, bleh. except the squirrel that touched the things on the box on my pole. He died with a lot. Anyway. What we realized is that actually scientists a couple years ago, they were studying chickens. He said, if you take a dead chicken and put it in cold water, it does that. And then they realized that it's a combination of drowning and cold water and the muscles arching backwards. And so even the evolutionary paleontologists today said the dead dinosaur posture is evidence of drowning. So now we get to ask the question, okay, Mr. Evolutionary Paleontologist, how come all those land animals drown? Why are they buried with fish? Why are they buried with clams? That's weird, unless there was a global flood, and then that's what you'd expect. Yep. So we ask the question now, does Noah have a problem? How do we get dinosaurs on the ark? Well, let me give you several possible explanations. One, not all dinosaurs are big. In fact, the average sized dinosaur is maybe as big as a pony. This is Compsognathus. He's the size of a chicken, full grown. So he doesn't have to take the big species. He could take a smaller species. Or he could take, and I don't think eggs, but juveniles. Why has it got to take great-great-granddaddy Apatosaurus at the end of his life? Why not take Junior? But also, how many dinosaurs would Noah have had to take on the ark if he had to take dinosaurs on the ark? Millions? Thousands? Well, if he has to take 2 of each of the unclean animals, of each kind, if there are 50 basic kinds of dinosaurs, maybe 100 dinosaurs. Whoop-de-doo. So even if he had to take the big ones, there's still plenty of room on the ark. Plus all the food, plus all the water they need for an entire year. Because, of course, they were on the ark for a year, not 40 days and 40 nights. Read the text. How many animals would Noah have had to take on the ark in total? Maybe 800 pairs? Because we're not talking about species, we're talking about kinds. So there's a dog kind, there's a cat kind, there's a platypus kind with one species. Most kinds have multiple species. All Noah has to do is take representatives, male and female, of all the kinds. They've got some amount of genetic diversity within them. And then after the flood, they start reproducing. And through the normal process of sexual reproduction, the genes get shuffled. And you can get things popping up that are very different than the parents very quickly. All that's written about, by the way, on creation.com. Look up my article series, Species Were Designed to Change. But if dinosaurs were on the ark, oh, come on, man, you really believe that? Yeah, I do. And if they were on the earth after the flood, then there should be some historical references to them. And I submit to you that the dragon legends that we get from cultures all around the world sure seem like dinosaurs. Because if I was going to invent a mythological animal, I would take something I know, like the wolf, and make it 50 feet tall and say that it ate the village. If I lived in Europe, I wouldn't say, oh yeah, these little lizards that we see only in the summertime can grow as big as a house. That'd be weird. But there are some good evidences historically. Now, some of the creations at this point will bring up a bunch of stuff I disagree with. So I'm only going to give you my favorite evidences, the ones I like the most. And one of them is in the floor of a cathedral in England. The tomb of Bishop Bell, who died 600 years ago. 400 years before we supposedly discovered dinosaurs. And in his tomb, you see that rectangle around it? Some of it's broken away and repaired, but on this brass thing, there's carved all these animals you can instantly recognize. There's a bat, there's a dog, there's a fish, there's a bird. Anyone disagree with me? There's 2 sauropod dinosaurs with their necks wrapped around each other. I know this one on the left is hard to see, but his head arches this way. And notice they're standing. And notice it's not the Fred Flintstone dinosaur with the tail dragging on the ground. Their tails are held upright like modern paleontologists say. Yeah, they held their tail upright as a counterbalance for the neck. Oh, brilliant. And the guy on the left, really hard to see here, but he has spikes on his tail, like Spinosaurus. Oh. And in fact, these two sauropod-like things with their necks wrapped around each other is a really common motif in ancient history. Here's one from Babylon. Now, if you think these guys' necks and tails are a little too long, I'm not going to fault the people for having an imperfect understanding of what they look like, but consider Tanistropheus. Oh. Let's go to the other side of the world. The largest city on earth in about 500 years, 600 years ago was a place called Angkor Wat. It was the head of the Khmer Empire in modern-day Cambodia, literally the largest city on earth. And they had this unbelievably complicated irrigation system where they could feed millions of people rice because of the way they controlled the water. But there was a drought, and their civilization collapsed. And the jungle took over most of the city. But now the Vietnam War is over. Archaeologists are going back there because it's safe again, and they're re-exposing this unbelievable city. And there's one particular place. This is the Ta Prohm Temple. There's a door frame there, and there's a Buddha, a water buffalo, there's a monkey, and then there's that thing. What's your first response when you see that? It looks like a stegosaur. Now, his head is a little too big. You can't see the spikes on his tail, but he's standing up and he's got things on his back. Now, even some creationists that don't believe this said, no, that's just a continuation of this motif. It just circles around and goes there. But that would be the only one that looks like that. But plus, someone just found another one around the corner that looks even more like a stegosaur than this one does. This is hundreds of years before we discovered dinosaurs. And yet, it sure looks like one. Now, is that proof? No, because science can't prove anything. But it is circumstantial evidence that man did have a memory of what big lizardy things look like, but that's not possible because they died out 65 million years ago, right? You ever see a picture of this? The age of dinosaurs, right? You've seen pictures like this, right? You got dinosaurs. Look, there's no birds. There's no mammals. There's no grass in this picture. This is wrong. Even in graduate school, I was taught that grasses didn't evolve until 35 million years ago. So if you have 65 million years ago, dinosaurs died out, grasses evolved here, and then we have today. Grasses that, bamboos, the stuff that grows in your yard, sea grasses in the oceans. There's a lot of species of grass, and they're new. And yet, buried in dinosaur stomachs, we found all the major families of grasses. Oh, so they didn't evolve recently. They at least predated or coexisted with dinosaurs, and yet the fossil record has no evidence of grass until recently, except in dinosaur stomachs. So the fossil record is fickle. Some things are preserved, some things aren't, which makes it really hard to make models of history based on what is absent. But this is wrong. Why? Because we have found now as many species of mammal buried with dinosaurs as we have species of dinosaurs. We're going back to some of the bone beds that were dug in the 1800s. And the modern paleontologists are looking at this and saying, oh, they destroyed everything. Because the fossil hunters were looking for the big bones. So what they do, they dug through everything else, and now it's all broken up and piled on the side. That includes the little dinosaurs, the mammals, and a lot of other things, ruined. We found so many mammals, things that almost look like flying squirrels. Something that looks just like a platypus, just twice as big as a platypus. Something that looks like a badger, it has a baby dinosaur in its stomach. Something that looks like a beaver, preserved with his hairs. Something that looks like a hedgehog. In fact, hedgehogs are unique of all mammals. Hedgehog hairs, they're not porcupines, they're hedgehogs. And they have hairs that are different than everything else. But that thing is the size of a hedgehog, the shape of a hedgehog, and his hairs are preserved. It's a hedgehog. So next time you see a Jurassic Park movie, there better be a hedgehog rustling through the underbrush. But they're not going to show you that because that would cause confusion in the minds of the people they're trying to convince that evolution is true. Now, you see the word MA there? 130 MA, 164 MA. You know what that means, MA? That's Latin for mega annum, millions of years ago. But hold on a second. If the dinosaurs died out 65 million years ago, that means that beavers predate the dinosaurs. That's in the evolutionary literature. I'm not making this up. But this was not known even 30 years ago. This is new information, and we have to be very careful with science, because science can rip the rug right out from underneath us when we're not paying attention. Remember that movie about 10 years ago called Hidden Figures with Kevin Costner? The African-American ladies doing the calculating to get the man to the moon. That's a great movie. Well, that facility in Maryland is still there. And a guy a couple years ago was dropping off his wife to go to work. And he looks over in the woods and it's this pile of rocks. He goes, I'm going to walk over there and look at these rocks. And he makes a world-class discovery. He finds this rock. It's about this big. And in this rock, there are sauropod footprints, pterosaur footprints, there's a nodosaur footprint, there's a coprolite, which is a piece of fossilized dinosaur dung, which is really weird because have you ever tripped over a piece of fossilized cat mess? No, that stuff doesn't last long. It disintegrates quickly, and yet we've got tens of thousands of petrified dinosaur poops. I've got one on my mantelpiece at home. Because, nerds, that's what we do. Oh, check it out, man. You put it up on your mantle. But in this fossil, there's also in blue mammal footprints. See, fossils aren't just bones. This is the fossilization of a behavior pattern of a community of animals that all lived at the same time. They all walked through the same mud puddle. That's really cool. So, yes, mammals lived with dinosaurs. At least as many species of mammals as species of dinosaurs. But what about birds? Birds in the fossil record are weird. Some of the ancient birds had claws in their wings, they got teeth, but the teeth are not like reptile teeth. They look more like a dolphin tooth. It's like a conical thing with a narrow base. Not like reptile teeth, but some of the ancient birds had teeth. Something else weird about ancient birds, a lot of them, when you eat chicken or turkey and you go for the white meat, there's a thing here, isn't there? And you kind of have to dig it out. Well, that keel is an attachment point for the flight muscles that gives the bird a mechanical advantage. It helps them to fly. It makes their chest muscles that much stronger. Well, we have a flat breastbone. Birds have a keel. A lot of the ancient birds had a flat breastbone. But there's one modern bird. It's called the hoatzin, or the stink bird, because it digests its food in the crop, and it ferments, and so they stink. But the hoatzin of South America, genetically, it's an oddball. It's not related to any other modern bird. But the hoatzin also has fully functional wing claws, because you realize the wing is the hand of the bird, right? That's their fingers under the feathers, just like a bat. That's their fingers under the skin. Well, fingers can terminate in claws, and the hoatzin has wing claws, and they have a flat breastbone. No other bird in the world has it except these guys. So it basically looks like an Archaeopteryx. Just doesn't have the teeth. So I'm guessing that this is a holdover for some of the ancient birds we see buried with dinosaurs, still alive today. Well, we do have birds in the fossil record and feathers on birds in the fossil record. This is Anchiornis huxleyi, named after Charles Darwin's good friend Huxley. Supposedly, again, 160 million years ago, it's 100 million years before the dinosaurs went extinct. Can you see the feathers? It has a bill. You know what a bill is? You know what a beak of a bird is? And why a beak is different than a jaw? Because birds can do this. I can't. Birds have a movable palate. We have a fixed palate, so we can't move our upper jaw up. Birds can. Guy's got a beak. It's got bird wings. Notice the tail feathers. Here's a cool thing. Birds don't have tails. They have feathers. Okay. Next time you eat a chicken, you can be like, Carter told me to look at the rear end of a chicken. You're going to look at the rear end of the chicken, and you're going to see on his rear end a little teeny thing. It's called a pygostyle. It's not a tail like an animal. Like, have you ever gotten next to a dog that's wagging his tail, and a tail hits you across the knee? Oh, man, it hurts. It's happened, right? Like a Labrador retriever. Why does it hurt? Because there's bones in the tail. That's his spinal cord, spinal column in the tail. Birds don't have that. They have a little thing. It's stiff. It's only a couple of bones. Sometimes they're elongated. And if they have a tail, it's just feathers sticking off the pygostyle. Unlike dinosaurs who had long bony tails. Oh, that guy is a bird, except for the teeth. Oh, but I remember being young, being convinced that evolution was true. And I would have said things like this and said, look at this. This is the fossil record of the dinosaurs. And look at that. In time, throughout the Triassic, the Jurassic, and the Cretaceous. By the way, most of the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park are Cretaceous dinosaurs. Never asked me to watch science fiction with you. Sorry. But as you go back in time, look, they go all the way back to a common ancestor. Doesn't that prove evolution is true? Well, you see all the dotted lines on there? Those are the things they're assuming are true, but they actually don't have any evidence for. What happens if you cover up all the dotted lines? You're left with 50 family sticks, independent of each other, with no connecting links. You've heard of the missing link between man and monkeys, right? Well, there's missing links between almost every group of animal in the fossil record and almost every other group of animal in the fossil record. The independent groups is the rule. Every once in a while, they find something they call a transitional form. But the lifetime of that transitional form, for 150 years now of history, is about 10 years before it's discredited. The ones they're talking about today, they weren't talking about in National Geographic when I was growing up. And the ones they're talking about then, they weren't talking about in 1925 Scopes monkey trial. And the ones they're talking about then weren't the ones they're talking about in Charles Darwin's day. Transitional fossils usually, oh, that wasn't true, when they just kind of push it away and ignore it and start talking about something else. But that's the rule. 50 family sticks, because only about 50 basic kinds of dinosaur. Now, I'm going to take this. I'm going to draw red lines on each of these. I'm going to shove everything off to the side, because I want to put birds and mammals in the same context. Those are all the mammals and birds that I've talked about and where they're found in the fossil record. Now, I have a question mark after birds because we don't have many. But it does look like birds, flying birds, go all the way back to the beginning of the dinosaur era. And mammals, I have it faded at the bottom because we keep finding more and more. In fact, recently, I skipped, okay, never mind. Let's talk about dinosaurs with feathers now. Do dinosaurs have feathers? I'm not going to say no. I'm going to say, I don't care. The Bible does not say dinosaurs did not have feathers. So if they have feathers or not, I'm perfectly comfortable with whatever the answer is. Okay? Now, I do not see evidence for dinosaurs with feathers that is similar to the evidence of birds with feathers. I've shown you the feathers on birds. Here's the poster child of a feathered dinosaur. This is Sinosauropteryx. Can you see the fuzzy stuff that on his back and down his tail? That was seen as the evidence of feathered dinosaurs. This is the first one. They beat us over the head with this for 10 or 15 years. But then Alan Fiducia, who's an evolutionist, who believes birds evolved, he just doesn't believe birds evolved from dinosaurs. He puts them in an earlier branch of the reptile tree. He said, if you look at this under a microscope, let's see, what do you say? He says, the fuzz is underneath the animal's skin and is obvious to anyone who looks. So that's not feathers so much as decaying skin tissue that got petrified before the animal completely rotted away. That's collagen. That's what your skin is made of. In fact, when collagen breaks down, it can make lines, it can make tufts, it can make all the things that the evolutionists are using to say is evidence for dinosaur feathers. We've seen the same sort of patterns in mosasaurs, which are aquatic reptiles, which definitely didn't have feathers. We see the same sorts of things in pterosaurs, which no one thought had feathers until recently. Now they find these fuzzy stuff, oh, they must have feathers too. But the feathers are not like modern flight feathers with a vane, and they're asymmetrical with a wide side and a narrow side. If you ever find a feather on the ground, look at it. It's curved. In fact, think about what feathers are. A feather is like a hyper-complex hair. It grows out of a hole in the skin, like a hair, but instead of a hair, which is a straight line, it grows up and then unfurls into a very complex shape. So, if dinosaurs have feathers covering their skin, well, they're reptiles. When a reptile grows, it sloughs its skin off. How does it slough off its skin? It had to lose all its feathers, too. There's some problems with this idea here. Here is on the bottom, the wing of a turkey vulture. See the feathers, how they attach to the bone? Take the feathers away, and you're left with these little knobs. Can you see the knobs on the third thing down? Wrong picture. Here on C, can you see the dots? Those are called quill knobs. I don't think they're built there initially. I think this is a response as the muscles are pulling on the feather to change the shape of the wing. I think those knobs develop. I'm not sure, but I think that's what happens. Flying birds have these things called quill knobs on their wings. Penguins do not. Albatrosses do not. Even though they're flying birds, an albatross has a really hard time taking off the ground and a really hard time landing. But once they're in the air, they're the most graceful flyers in the bird kingdom. But why do they have a hard time taking off and landing? Because they don't change the shape of their wing. They don't have those muscles to do that. Like if you're ever in an airplane, you're coming down for a landing, and you're on a window seat, you see the things that extend, the wing changes shape. That's to change the aerodynamics of the wing. Birds do that too. The top picture is the arm bone of a velociraptor. Now, velociraptors are not this big. That's Deinonychus. Velociraptors are this big. But Jurassic Park made them bigger to make them scarier. Because Deinonychus isn't scary, but Velociraptor is scary. Okay, but that's the top picture. The second one down, B, that is a zoom up of this rectangle here. And these arrows, which you can see, are pointing to little dots you can't see. There's 5, 6 of them in a row here. Little equally spaced dots that look like quill knobs. But 1, they're hard to see. 2, they're tiny. 3, no one believes that Velociraptor could fly. So why would they have quill knobs? Even if flying birds don't have them, and all the including ostriches and emus, all the non-flying birds don't have quill knobs, why would there be quill knobs on a velociraptor? And yet they're there. There's some dots. So maybe they had quills. Maybe they had feathers. I don't care. But again, the evidence for the feathers is not there like we see in the birds. Okay? You see what I'm trying to do here? As a scientist, I have to cut the difference between what I can and cannot know. And then I have to say, okay, what I cannot know, I make a reasonable approximation, or I can say, I have no idea. And scientists don't like saying, I have no idea. Why? Because the boogeyman comes in. The smartest people in the world think they know how the world was made. If there's big gaps in their knowledge, something might be true that they don't want to be true. That's just a small scale example. But we know that T-Rex did not have feathers. Why? Because we've got fossilized skin from different parts of his body. And if there's a feather, there has to be a hole in the skin. A scale, in fact, the older I get, the more scaly my skin looks, right? A scale is just ripply skin. It's not a feather. Scales and feathers have nothing to do with one another. Hairs and feathers are similar in some ways, but not scales. But here we have scale, petrification, different parts of the T-Rex, no feathers. But what if none of this matters? What if I could show you that dinosaur fossils cannot be millions of years old? What if I could use 3 completely different areas of science that all say dinosaur fossils are not millions of years old? Then evolution isn't true. And the question, did birds evolve from dinosaurs, is moot. And whether or not dinosaurs have feathers, who cares? The thought that birds have feathers and dinosaurs have feathers is used to support the idea of evolution. But again, God could have created dinosaurs with feathers. It doesn't prove evolution if they had feathers. But here we have some electron microscope pictures of the inside of a Triceratops horn. This is found in what's called the Hell Creek Formation of Montana. Trade secret. Everything stinks. The bones smell as if they're still decaying. Well, that's weird. These things are buried 70 million years ago. I can't leave a ham sandwich on the counter for a couple days before it starts turning green. You think I'd bury that ham sandwich in my backyard for 1,000 years and expect to find anything left? What if I took a pig and buried it in my backyard and came back 1,000,000 years later? Would there be anything left of the pig? Not unless it's petrified. But the inside of these bones is not petrified. The outside is, which I think is what helped preserve the inside. But what we see under the electron microscope, the center part of this horn bone, is these delicate materials that these things tend to turn to powder over time. And then these little blobs of spikes, you know what those are? Those are osteoblasts. Bone cells. That's exactly what a bone cell looks like. Those little spikes, when a pathologist finds maybe a dead body out in the desert or in a woods or something, one of the things they can do to try to figure out how long ago the person died is they can look at the osteoblasts to see how much of the spikes have fallen off. Look at that. They look in pretty good position to me. This is shocking. This thing died 4,500 years ago. How on earth could it be in that preservation? But if I'm incredulous, what's the evolutionist going to say? They believe this thing died millions of years ago, and there's nothing in science that can preserve things for millions of years in that condition. Another team of scientists, that last one was collected by a couple of creationists. They published it in an evolutionary journal. But here's results from an evolutionary group. They're looking at a T-Rex that was discovered in the Hell Creek Formation. And they tried to get the big leg bone of the T-Rex out, but it was too heavy for the helicopter. So they cut it in half. But an enterprising young scientist said, I'm going to take a sample of the inside of the femur. She got back to the lab. She soaked it in something called EDTA, which is a chelating agent that pulls out calcium. I've used it in my own work in working with corals. You preserve a coral in formaldehyde and soak it in EDTA, which is a very weak acid. It dissolves the calcium carbonate, and you're left with this rubbery stuff, which used to be the coral. Well, when you do that, you're left with dinosaur meat, flexible tissues, what look like red blood cells. And it's funny because our red blood cells don't have nuclei. Reptile red blood cells do. And these red blood cells have little dots in the middle, just like reptile red blood cells. This looks like dinosaur blood. No, not if it's 65 million, 70 million years ago. A couple years later, that same team, they're looking at these cells. Again, shocking that they're cells. They isolate the cells, and they stain them with a stain that I've used in the laboratory. It's a stain that stains DNA only. And it lights up what looks like, in green, a nucleus. DNA in dinosaur bones, not after millions of years old. On the right, though, knowing that bacteria have DNA, they did it again with a stain for a protein that bacteria don't have. It's something you have. It's called a histone. It's the DNA it's a protein your DNA wraps around in the nucleus. And it also, in red, lights up what looks like a nucleus. So there's evidence of soft tissue. There's evidence of DNA. Do I have that next slide? And there's evidence of carbon-14 in dinosaur bones. Carbon-14 cannot last for millions of years. Period. So, Mr. Evolutionist, here's three completely different, and by the way, that's discussed in our book, Titans of the Earth, Sea, and Air. That's what it's up there for. There's three completely different areas of science that tell us that dinosaur bones are not millions of years old. The preservation of the tissue, the presence of what looks like DNA, and the carbon-14. So all of a sudden, it looks like dinosaurs are telling us that the Earth is not millions of years old. Again, a lot more information in Creation Magazine. Not only do we have Exploring Geology with Mr. Hibb for a kid's book, maybe middle schoolish, but it was such a good seller that we came up with a second book called Exploring Dinosaurs with Mr. Hibb. I believe we have those on the table also. I'm going to leave you with this. 1 Peter 3:15, just like before. But in your hearts honor Christ the Lord as holy. always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for reason for the hope that's in you. You do it with gentleness and respect. Hey, did I insult the evolutionist? Did I insult Christians who don't agree with me? I don't think so. I did, however, try to challenge with honest questions, and I'm trying to give honest answers to things I don't know and things that I think I do know. We can have these discussions. We don't have to yell at each other. But the questions immediately start challenging some sacred cows in people's minds. And they challenge the culture around us. If you want to accept that dinosaurs were on the earth with Adam and Eve, that they're on the ark, they're on the earth after the flood, if you want to accept that the evidence is telling us that they're not millions of years old, you have to swim against the tide. As a Christian, are you strong enough to do that? Are you? That's my challenge for you this morning. So God bless you to study. God bless you to be brave. God bless you to be the Christian you're being called to be. Sir. Thank you, Mo.
Okay, so Brian's got some guys that are gonna help us take up an offering real quick. We didn't do it already yet. Well, let's come forward and pray, and then we can do it all a little orderly. And so I'm gonna have them go ahead and come on forward. And there's a couple of things that make speakers very welcome here. Okay, the first thing is we want them to teach from the Word of God. And that is our authority, right? And so it is nice when all of this lines up, and it is nice to dig deeper. Our faith is not dependent upon what the next find is, but it is really nice to look and continue to search deeper and ask hard questions. And so I appreciate the work that Dr. Carter's doing and their ministry. It is exciting and it is encouraging to me. The second thing is it is nice when a ministry comes to support the work of the local church, not to take the place of the local church. And this is an equipping ministry to give information for the saints. And so along those lines, he has come here and asked us nothing. We put him up in a hotel last night, but other than that, they've not asked us for anything. And so we have offered to take this love offering to support the work that they're doing, to help offset some of the travel and other things. And so if you would like to help support the ministry, I would encourage you to consider it. We're going to pray, and then we're going to take a short break. He's got some stuff out there that if you want to look at it before the 11 o'clock service, that is fine. You're welcome to. If you want to ask him questions, I think we've about wore his voice out, but go ahead and ask him. And then we'll start back up in here at 11. Father, we thank you for this amazing time. It is encouraging to hear that there are alternatives to just the standard world's message of, well, the Bible must be wrong. We know that the Bible is right. We believe it to be the Word of God. And it is also nice to challenge ourselves and to look deeper and to look harder and to say, here's the reason why we believe we are right. And so, Lord, we trust in you. We pray your blessing over this time, over the offering that is going to be taken, and over Dr. Carter and CMI. May you use this to provide for them and to bring glory to your name. In Jesus' name, amen.